I've worked for over 20 years in the Western water resources and water policy arena, including 3.5 years as executive director for the Klamath Water Users Association, starting in 2001. That's what brought me to Klamath Falls. For the past 5 years, I've owned a water policy consulting firm here in Klamath Falls, and one of my clients is an organization called the Family Farm Alliance, which I work for as executive director under contract. The Alliance is seen as really a solutions-driven organization by both political parties. We've been asked to testify before congressional committees on water and environmental matters 26 times in the last 5 years. And a lot of those issues that pop up are some of the same issues that folks are wrestling with here in the Klamath Basin.
My name is Greg Addington. I'm the executive director for the Klamath Water Users Association. We represent essentially customers of the Bureau of Reclamation. And I mean customers because these are folks that pay for the services they receive from the Bureau of Reclamation. These are the same people that in 2001 had their water supply curtailed. These folks that I represent, their water supplies from the Klamath system, from either the Klamath Lake or the Klamath River. And they represent about 170,000 acres in the Klamath Reclamation Project, encompass 17 either irrigation districts, drainage districts, improvement districts, ditch companies here in the basin, and about 1,200 family farms and ranches.
My name is Steve Kandra. I'm a third-generation Klamath Irrigation Project farmer. My family has been farming in the Klamath Project since 1911, 99 very tough, challenging years. I have served 27 years of my life as a board of director or a manager of irrigation districts in both Oregon and California, where my farm is located. Even though I live at Merrill, my family has been farming in California for 99 years. So the Klamath Irrigation Project and irrigated agriculture is the story of my family's life and existence in the Klamath Basin.
Thank you. I'm Don Gentry, Vice Chairman of the Klamath Tribes, who are the Klamath, Modoc, and Yehuskan Band of Snake Indians. And I'm here to represent them tonight and answer some of these questions that might be viewed as tough to some. But I'm here to represent the tribes because this is a solution to many years of conflict. It's a solution to 90 years of our fish being denied us is the Klamath Tribes. It's a solution to broken relationships. Having lived here my life long, except for a few years, I have many relationships throughout the community, and it's important for us as a community to come together around these issues and find solutions that benefit all.
My name is Becky Hyde, and I'm a board member of the Upper Klamath Water Users Association. I ranch with my husband and 4 children in Beatty. My husband's family, similar to Steve's story, are going to celebrate our 100th year in ranching in this basin next summer. We are kind of a tough lot. We plan to be ranching 100 years from now up there as well in Beatty. So we're concerned about a lot of things like farming, ranching, tribal issues.
Good evening. I'm Toby Freeman, and I'm Pacific Power's Regional Community Manager. Thanks for having me here this evening. And we are privileged to serve 1.7 million customers in 6 western states. I myself have worked on Klamath-related issues for about 9 years now.
My name is Trey Sen. I'm the director of the Klamath County Economic Development Association, which just a few weeks ago celebrated its 35-year-old anniversary. And our job primarily is recruitment of new industry and/or economic development, and the expansion of new industry or economic development, and of course retention of various economic development interests, which does in our case include, as you would imagine, new and expanded industries, and with Oregon Institute of Technology and high tech and fiber optics and all of that. But it also is the traditional economic development entities, whether it be
the actual discussions that led to this agreement are 4.5, 5 years old. But the history obviously goes back a lot longer than that. And from a water user perspective, you go back to the early, mid-'90s with shortages, and then, of course, 2001, which was devastating to the folks I represent and to many businesses here in town. So we found ourselves in a situation where we were at the table with a lot of different entities that all, as we looked around the room, it was pretty much everyone we could think of that had anything to do with our ability to get water. And early on, those discussions were not about water, they were about power. And they grew from there, and we began to actually have a dialogue with some of the people that we traditionally only spoke to in dueling press releases or from other sides of a microphone in a congressional oversight hearing or in a courtroom. That was the dialogue that we had. So we began actually sitting down at the table with folks on a one-on-one basis in a group setting and talking about some very, very hard issues. And that led to where we are today. The thing that I want to make the point, and what's unfortunate to me is the divisive nature of this locally. I think it's a good thing, and I think it represents dialogue. It should, and it's going to be ongoing dialogue. It's not going to end. It didn't end the day this thing was signed. It won't end when it's implemented. It's going to be an ongoing discussion about changing the way resources are managed here in this basin, because it hasn't worked for us, and it hasn't worked for a lot of other parties either. Unfortunately, dams are the headline on this thing, and I understand why. That is a big issue. But the KBRA is not about dams. The KBRA is about stability. It's about making sure that you have a viable ag industry here into the future. And others here can talk about it from their perspective. But it's not about dams for us. It's not at all. It is true that the agreements are tied together, the KBRA and the actual Klamath Hydro Settlement Agreement that deals with what happens to the dams. But we wanted them tied together because we didn't want the possibility of dams coming out without us dealing with these other issues. So that's why that's a critical issue for us. At the end of the day, we could win some lawsuits, tribes could win some lawsuits, Pacificor could win a lawsuit. I mean, nobody was getting ahead and nobody was getting anywhere. We were spinning our wheels and spending a ton of money. So we sat down to try to come up with a better way, and I think we did it, and I'm happy to been a part of it.
Why the restoration agreement? That's a great question. For my community, which has suffered significant water shutoffs, and that's within the Klamath Irrigation Project twice in less than a decade, the status quo of how we've been doing business is unsustainable and certainly jeopardizes a large portion of the agricultural economy and base for Klamath County. My community, it needs water supply certainty, and the restoration agreement supplies that. My community pumps water for a lot of different reasons, some of it for what I call efficiency of the use of water. And so we need affordable energy rates to move that water around. And the best solution to environmental and ESA problems is a lot of fish, not what I would call political legislative solutions. So that is how we intend to address through the restoration agreement, is to fix problems, not to avoid problems or ignore problems. Why the KBRA? Well, Greg mentioned that we've tried a lot of different methodologies on how to deal with our water supply issues. We've litigated unsuccessfully, very expensive, very time-consuming. Litigation is unpredictable. We've tried political processes, and as we know, every 2 years, we get to change that process. That is unpredictable, unreliable. And we've tried what I've called the media wars, which is the attempt to win the hearts and minds of the electorate, which is a willow in the wind for example, that's used, the dams are more important than water for the irrigation community. It just shows you how things can be misrepresented and people grasp onto. So the Klamath Basin Restoration Agreement for my community is a long sought-after methodology for us to solve problems, work with those that whom we've had former conflict and now are looking for solutions. It is a tool for the future.
When I think of the KBRA and realize where we're at and what it took to get here, the thing that first comes to my mind is people, and not just my people who have been affected by this, the status quo and the problems that we have with a broken ecosystem that affected our fisheries and the battles over water. It's affected all of us as a community. And to me, when I think of the KBRA, I think it's just right that people would work together and find solutions. I was born in this area. I mentioned earlier that I was taught to hunt and fish by my father, and I'm so thankful for that. Through hunting and fishing, I was able to be who I believe Creator placed me on this earth to be as a Native person. And I think we all have roles in our community here. Think of my people. I remember when I used to take the Chwam, who are on the endangered species list, to my people, and in that cultural exchange and just the warmth that I was greeted with as those elders talked about why they liked the Chwam over the Koptu and so forth. So I've experienced that in my lifetime, and I have grandchildren that have never even caught the fish and have never experienced that. So when I could see, from my perspective, other people in our community also affected by the problems that we're having with water, I could relate to that in that regard. I've shared with some of my friends in the agricultural community that I really could relate to the potential loss of a lifestyle and a culture and the ability to teach values and ethics, through a way of living as the agricultural community does. We do the same thing as tribal people. So I think of people, I think of this as a solution for the people. I've worked for the tribes for over 25 years in the Natural Resource Department and met many people as we worked towards solutions in restoring the broken Sprague River and other systems around, and have established many positive relationships with folks in the agricultural community. My family, I have family members that ranch, and my wife's family. I have family members that have relationships and worked in the potatoes over the years. So to me, when I think of the KBRA and I think of the solution that it provides, I think of people. I think of all of us. And it is a real solution. It's so much better than the battles that we've waged against each other over water in the courts and all the money that we spent trying to, I guess, fight for what we think is ours. It's so much better to form partnerships and relationships and realize that we have a lot in common. We're all members of this Klamath Basin. We're all here in this community. We're all here to stay. The Klamath tribes aren't going to go away. We look at our people in the basin as our neighbors, and according to our culture, we've always been a welcoming people. Even there's legends that talk about if we only had a flea to share with our visitors, that we would share a flea. That's part of our culture. So to me, the KBRA is right. It's a solution. It's right for people to honor and respect one another and try to accommodate one another in a solution like this.
So I think, one of the things that's happened the last couple of years is we've spent a lot of time talking about a document, which is a lot of words on paper, and not talking about something that I think pretty much all of us who wander around know, which is that, when you have broken relationships and you fix them, that's a good thing. And I will be bold and say that the document is not what's important here. The relationships up and down this river and the change that has happened is what's important. And it's a change not just because of farmer versus fish, or, environmentalist versus rancher. It's, we've had battles between the ag community that, frankly, go against everything that I believe about rural culture.
I think as folks know, and certainly we're hearing here tonight, there are a myriad of environmental, cultural, and public policy issues at play here in the Klamath Basin and that are reflected in these two agreements. The other folks at the table are really the folks who can speak best to those. For us, it's a fairly simple calculus. Our job is to work to deliver the least cost outcome for our customers. PacifiCorp has gone through 9 major FERC relicensings in the past decade and a half. We've settled almost all of those. Settlements like we have over on the North Umpqua River and the Lewis River up in Washington State. We're putting in fish passage facilities. We're modifying operations. They're pretty costly undertakings, but ultimately they represented the best and least cost outcome for our customers. We've got other projects like our Powerdale project on the Columbia River, or on a tributary to the Columbia River, along with our Condit project, where dam removal made most sense. Frankly, it was the least cost alternative available to us. And really, that's what this agreement represents on the Klamath. I know there are a lot of folks who don't understand or may question our motives for entering into the Klamath Hydro Settlement Agreement, but frankly, it's pretty simple. I thought Steve did a great job of sort of talking about what you learn as you deal with these big legal public policy issues. You fight and you find that doesn't work, and then you try and persuade people that your cause is of higher value, and frankly, that doesn't necessarily work either. And eventually, you get to yourself to a place where you discover that the most pragmatic approach is to negotiate. That's what we've done here. We've spent 10 years on this relicensing to date. We know that if the relicensing continues, we're looking at a $400 million capital investment to continue operations, and that operations are going to be severely curtailed because of new operating requirements. The notion that we are going to repeal the Endangered Species Act, the Clean Water Act, National Historic Preservation Act, et cetera, that's not a viable strategy. A viable strategy is to look at that most likely alternative and say, can we get a better deal for our customers? And that's what the Klamath Hydro Settlement Agreement represents. We will continue to operate these projects for the next decade. Yes, we will put a surcharge on our bills and collect a total of $200 million from our customers, about half what they'd spend were we trying to relicense these things. And at the end of those 10 years, we will hand over the keys to a dam removal entity. They will take the risk, cost, and responsibility of removing them if that's what the Secretary of Interior decides in 2012 is the right thing to do here, is in the best public interest. So that's where we sit. And again, our role is very simple. We recognize we sit in a much broader context. The Hydro Settlement Agreement and the Klamath Basin Restoration Agreement are linked, as Greg explained, and they only succeed together. And in that respect, we therefore support the Klamath Basin Restoration Agreement. We've got customers on all sides of this issue. We know what a volatile topic this tends to be. We've been part of this basin for about 100 years now, and we know the tough history this basin has had. The prospect of being able to reach some peace here is certainly something to be commended.
One of the things that KCETA, or either myself or a representative, was on from the very beginning was the old Hatfield Committee. And that taught me something about consensus, about everybody having to win every once in a while and everybody having to lose every once in a while and give in every once in a while and come up with an alternative idea and think. And think hard sometimes about what it is you're after and why you're trying to do this. And can you think and can you work outside the box, to coin a cliche? I think that KCETA looks at this as less litigation. I think it looks at it as more certainty for the farmers and for the tribe and for water interests. I think we think that the KBRA equals more jobs in the long run, and perhaps even in the short run when you're doing different mitigation work with the dams and everything. I completely agree. This really isn't about the dams, and I kind of am sorry that somehow it got spun that way once upon a time. The fact is, I think that the dams that will be staying are the ones that are the irrigation dam and the ones that are the flood control dams. So to us, this is somebody, not KCETA. We were not a part of the intricate planning and details of all of this. But when we look at it, when we see what our partners like Pacific Power and the water users and the tribe did, we're pretty solid yes with this. This, we think, makes more sense, however you spell it, than anything that we've seen come down the pipe before or since then.
Explain, your organization, what they give up in this settlement agreement process, and then also what you felt that you gained in exchange for that.
I think that when you look at really what we're giving up on things, to me it's important to sort of separate out and say, let's really focus on our need first. Because what we tend to do, and everybody does it, is we worry about the other guy quite a bit. And we struggled for a long time with issues related to the Klamath River and the dams and our views on fish or biology or whatever it might be. But we really sort of narrowed in and focused on what's important to us. Your question on what we gave up, I mean, what we really gave up on in this agreement is some legal arguments to the quantity of water that we believe we're entitled to. And this gets complicated very fast because you're talking about a lot of processes that have been going on for years. The Klamath River Basin adjudication started in the 70s. It's been ongoing. It's the largest ongoing litigation in the state of Oregon. And that has to do with quantifying who has what. How much does the project have? How much does off-project have? How much do the tribes have? And what are their priority dates? So for us, what we did is we said, what do we need? What can we live with? What would it take to live with theoretically a less amount of water? And we said, look, if we have the resources and the tools to manage less water in drier years in particular, we think that's better than the uncertainty of no water or a mid-season shutdown or something like that. So for us, we gave up our argument in the adjudication. Well, I shouldn't say we gave it up. We put it on hold pending these things working out. But what we did do is carve out a block we can depend on, and it's predictable and it's manageable. So people say we gave up somebody's water right, but again, it's a block of water. We said we're going to cap how much we divert, and then internally, we're going to have to create a process to align our demand with the available supply. And we think we can do that without people getting hurt involuntarily, and that was the key for us. So, there's issues related to the refuge, the refuge becoming a purpose of the Klamath Reclamation Project. I mean, that was a tough pill for a lot of the folks I represent. But again, we had to look at the practical realities. The refuge is going to get water. They're going to have some sort of water right. So let's embrace it. Let's keep focused on what we need and make sure we get that and not worry so much. So there was a lot of things related to dams, related to refuges, things like that we had to wrestle with and agree to. But physically for us, I mean, it really comes down to the water and making sure we had enough to operate, making sure we had enough that we could do this without involuntary shortages.
You know, water is the real secret to it. And what we all gave was we all contributed, the claimants contributed to what I would call resolving the shortage so that we could all benefit when there was times of plenty. And so when we look at the claims of all of the entities within the conversation, instead of one entity held whole during any condition, we basically have a formula or a methodology where we all contribute to the shortage and we all rejoice in the plenty. What we had is we traded the uncertainty of litigation processes, political processes, for the certainty of negotiated process. It's always interesting to me that, for example, we have folks that are trying to litigate for a power rate, and the uncertainty of that venue to deal with the value of that power rate, and they failed because they cannot control the process. When you negotiate, at least you have some control of the processes and you're not releasing that control to others. You basically are sharing that control within the group. So I see what we're all gaining out of this is each one of the individuals that what I would call participates in good faith controls the process. And then if you're outside the process, you have no control, or if you litigate, you have no control.